And now, it's Boomer Life, lifestyle discussion designed to make your life more engaging, meaningful, and complete. Celebrating the baby boomer generation, this is Boomer Life on CISL 650.
Well, hello and welcome to Boomer Life here on CISL 650. Today, we're going to talk about solutions to debt problems, and our conversation will hopefully give you every reason to believe there is indeed hope in what seems to some at times to be a pretty bleak scenario. If you're feeling like you're on an island of financial trouble, if you're loaded up with excessive debt, you don't necessarily have to feel overwhelmed and isolated, although most of us do, at least at some point along the way. So in studio with us today is the Senior Vice President of Abakhan and Associates, Trustees in Bankruptcy. Phil McCourt is with us. Hello, Philip. Nice
Hi.
to see you, sir.
Hi, Stirling.
You're a man who's been in the insolvency business for quite some time, since 1983. That's a long time and a lot of experience you bring to this conversation.
Yes, you can date me like that for sure.
All right, well, I'm doing my best here. But now, you've always, since 1983, you've been in the insolvency business. So what's the difference between being in the insolvency business in the 80s and being a trustee in 2014? Is the practice essentially the same? People still have financial difficulties. Are the remedies the same? Or is 2014 a happier or healthier environment for indebted people?
That's a good question, Stirling. No, things certainly have changed since I started in the personal insolvency business for bankruptcies and proposals and whatnot. Mm-hmm. The Bankruptcy Act has changed to particularly provide for proposals, actually. Proposals to creditors, where creditors get a certain percentage of their debt over a period of time, or the debtor pays over a period of time to give the creditors some money, have become very, very much more popular and much easier to do than they were back in the old days.
Just a curiosity question for you, Phil. You were talking about, now this would be on the personal side.
Yes.
With these consumer proposals. On the other side, where you're talking about the corporate side, yeah. Is there an equivalent, or is that simply just an individual remedy only, the consumer proposal?
Oh no, certainly there's corporations can do proposals as well.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. Actually, and consumer proposals are for those who owe less than $250,000. So for individuals that owe more than $250,000, they have to make a different proposal than a consumer proposal. The same proposal, the type of proposal that a corporation would make, actually.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
But very few individuals, Phil, get in hock more than $250,000, do they?
There are some, but most not, yes.
Okay. When did you join Abakhan and Associates?
In 2001, I joined George. Yes.
Okay, and you now in those days were they trustees as well, or has the firm evolved into a trustee organization since 2001?
No, George Abakhan. Sorry, when I say George, he's our fearless leader
and a former guest on Boomer Life, I might add.
Yes. He actually got his. I think he got his trustee's license in or about 1981 or 1982.
Okay, all right.
So he was with a firm that eventually became Deloitte Haskins and Sells, and then became Deloitte. Mm-hmm. And he left that firm in 1998, and then I was with that firm as well, and I left Deloitte in 2000 and joined him in 2001.
Right, and now in 2014, there are 5 locations for Abakhan and Associates: Victoria, Surrey, here in Vancouver, of course, as well as upcountry in Vernon and Prince George. So the firm is expanding, I suppose, from a business model, not a bad thing, but it would also suggest there are a lot of British Columbians in hock who need your help.
That's true. I mean, yeah, the firm is expanding, and all of our offices are keeping quite busy.
George was talking to us when he visited us, and talking about the big flaw or the big pitfall for individuals is still the credit card. Is that still where we hit the most difficulty in terms of managing our personal affairs? We get a little carried away with the plastic and end up hooped.
I had a chap once who opened a restaurant, and the restaurant failed, and he supported his restaurant with credit cards, I can't remember exactly, 9 or 10 credit cards, $400,000 worth of credit card debt.
Oh, my.
The credit card is very easy to use. Of course, not too many people have $400,000 worth of
One
credit
would
card debt.
hope not, no.
But it's quite easy to use, and people get offers of credit cards all the time. They always come in the mail, right?
Well, it's crazy. I mean, you get a 19-year-old kid that signs up to go to college this year, and one of the things that happens because you're now officially old enough to drink and go to college, well, you're old enough to carry plastic, so you start getting letters based on the registrar's information from the universities and colleges. The credit card companies are all over these kids, and they haven't even started university or post-secondary yet.
Yeah, that's right. And it's very easy. Or the guy sitting in a chair. Well, the university graduates, guys sitting as you go by, get a credit card here. And those guys those guys who are offering the credit cards obviously make some money when they manage to get somebody to take a credit card.
Of course.
And I mean that's not, they can't be faulted, but it's so easy to get a credit card that and people forget what they put on their credit card. So they put something on their credit card, and then they've got cash, but all of a sudden, they forget that really they should deduct what they've got on their credit card from the cash that they have, and they forget to do that, and then it builds up and builds up and builds up.
It was interesting, you talked briefly about that guy who ran up $400,000 on a dozen different credit cards trying to establish his small business. This is not unusual, is it? I have friends in small businesses who have started because they couldn't get financing from anybody else because people didn't buy into their business model or they didn't have the appropriate criteria the banks were looking for. So they went into personal debt to start off a small enterprise.
It's very common.
Some of them failed and some of them succeeded. And so in the case of those failures, those people ended up with a failed business and a huge, whopping credit card debt.
And a huge credit card debt. And some of them truly not, I mean, they have to know, but thinking that, no, this debt was all for the business. I didn't buy anything for myself with this credit card, this credit card on these credit cards. So this debt should go with the business. But it doesn't go with the business. The business may fail. The business may go bankrupt. But they're still stuck with that debt because it's their personal debt.
Okay, so now now we've got somebody in your office at Abakhan and Associates. You're in the Vancouver office, right?
Yep.
So now here's a person who's just had a good bash at a small business, and unfortunately, due to any number of circumstances, the business failed. So the business owes X number of dollars as some kind of thing, as an incorporated entity. So there's that problem. It's failed, and now it's in hock for that much money. Plus, the guy who started the business is personally liable because he used his personal credit cards for just a silly amount of money. So how do you separate that file? Do you treat the business as one entity, Phil, and then the personal debt as another? How does that small business collapse work itself through the insolvency process?
They're certainly separate, and you have to deal with them separately. It's not always the case that a company that is in financial trouble will actually go make an assignment of bankruptcy or go bankrupt.
Okay.
Primarily because it costs money to go bankrupt. And if the company has no assets, then the company will, and therefore the trustee doesn't think he can get paid, then the chances are the company will just wither away and die all on its own.
Oh, okay.
But the individual is a different story. Another type of debt that the individual can have besides the credit card debt is quite often revenue, CRA debt, Revenue Canada debt.
Oh, tax debt, you bet.
GST, unpaid GST remittances are a biggie, and unpaid source deductions if they have any kind of payroll at all. And those flow to the director of the company, and they have certain particularly source deduction debt, certain differences between that debt and a regular unsecured debt.
Can we talk about Revenue Canada, or the Canada Revenue Agency as they choose to be called these days, as it affects not only businesses but individuals? Because there are special provisions for the revenuers. They absolutely insist on always getting paid, and usually first, don't they?
Well, insist on always getting paid. Canada Revenue Agency is one of those creditors that doesn't really, they don't supply something to a party and then not get paid, so they know they've supplied something as a supplier, as a trade supplier does.
Sure.
I sell widgets to you, you owe me money. I know I have that debt.
Right.
See, a kind of revenue agency can go a long time before it in fact knows that there is a debt owing to it, and then they charge ridiculous interest rates.
But
at the end of the day, sorry, Sterling.
No, it's okay.
At the end of the day, yes. At the end of the day, of a corporation, the source deduction liability is second only to God, is the way I put it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Revenue Canada does enjoy a rather exalted status now,
yes,
doesn't
it does.
Now, what about on the individual side? Where does the tax department come in with respect to got to be paid, no exceptions, no stories, full stop?
The source deduction debt for a director, no, not so much for a director. Where you have a business where the individual has not set up a limited entity, but is just working as a proprietor, so runs a store.
Sure, yeah.
Has a few people that work in the store, has some source deduction liability. That liability in a proposal, if somebody makes a proposal, that liability sits out. It's required to be paid within a certain amount of time, as opposed to other unsecured debt. So the source deduction debt is required to be paid within 6 months of the filing of a proposal, which I'm sure we'll get to.
Yeah.
But in a bankruptcy, it actually has a priority, and CRA, whereas all other creditors are not allowed to take any legal action and garnishee or do anything, garnishee banks or wages or anything. Source deduction liability, CRA, does have that ability to actually impose on somebody's life after they make an assignment in bankruptcy, which is something people have to think about.
But let's take this to the individual side of the ledger, if we could, Phil, please. And suppose now I'm in deep financial trouble, and one of my debts, and of course there's usually a list, but one of my debts is to the Revenue Department. I owe X number of dollars in back taxes. So how does that work out when a proposal or a bankruptcy is undertaken?
That back income taxes is simply an unsecured debt, just like credit card debt.
Oh, okay.
And it's treated the same way.
I see. Now, let's talk about this because, unfortunately, we're learning more and more all the time from Statistics Canada and other agencies that we here in British Columbia aren't exactly the world's best money managers. There's a startlingly high percentage of us involved in insolvency issues, personal debt, and so on. So you've now got 5 offices, Phil. Your company started with 1. This is not a coincidence. So when it comes down to personal debt issues and trying to resolve them, there are 2 main remedies that a trustee firm can impose or assist with. One is the consumer proposal, and the other is the bankruptcy. Which of the 2 is the preferred route, and which of the 2 is more damaging to your reputation in terms of credit reporting and such?
Consumer proposals have become they've overtaken bankruptcies. In our office, for example, our offices, we do about 60-40. So 60% proposals, 40% bankruptcies.
Okay.
The credit bureau. I don't like the credit bureau. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but I can't read the reports, and I can't speak for the credit bureau.
Okay.
But from what I understand is, if proposals are a couple of notches above bankruptcy on your credit report,
less damaging.
Less damaging.
Right.
If most proposals are 5-year, consumer proposals are 5-year proposals, and most bankruptcies last 1 to 2 years. So the time that is on your record is pretty well the same.
Okay, right.
It's about the same.
Right.
Yeah.
And a consumer proposal basically is a promise to pay everybody you owe money to, the people who've been calling you and having their collection agents chase after you, et cetera, et cetera. You promise to pay all of your creditors back in an organized fashion over a specific period of time. Is that a reasonable definition of a consumer proposal?
It is, except not back. You can if you can pay all your creditors back, then there are certain other ways of doing that. I mean, you can make a 100% proposal if you want to,
but
if you can make a 100% proposal, then that's great.
Right, but most people don't. So
most of the time,
you're repaying your debts to a certain percentage, to a degree that everyone agrees you can afford.
It's a balancing act, Sterling. There's no point in making a proposal that you can't do. So therefore, you will pay what you can pay and what you can afford, given your lifestyle and given your income,
right, every
month, so much, and then to give the creditors a certain percentage on their debt. And most credit card, bank creditors, and even CRA, the 25, 30 cents is sort of seems to be what they like to get.
Okay, and the time frame for repaying that agreed to pennies on the dollar is what, 5 years, or can you do it in a shorter period of time?
You can do. You can do it in a shorter period of time. The maximum time is 5 years. The issue with doing it in a shorter period of time, in my mind, is what you want to do is you want to. There's no really negotiating. When you make a proposal, you make a proposal.
Sure.
And here's the proposal. If you have more to offer, and the creditors come back and say, start negotiating, and all of a sudden you have more to offer, I'm not particularly happy with that. What I want you to offer what you can now.
Right.
And if what you can offer now on a monthly basis, it can be paid over 2 years or 3 years or 4 years, then if I were your creditor, I'd say, well, then you can pay it over 5 years. So,
right.
So therefore, hence most consumer proposals are 5 years.
All right, we're just getting started on this one, friends. We're talking with Phil McCourt from Abakhan and Associates, trustees in bankruptcy and proposal administrators with 5 offices across British Columbia. And we'll continue here on Boomer Life after a quick timeout on CISL 650.
Celebrating the baby boomer lifestyle. This is Boomer Life on CISL 650.